Welcome back to the shop. In this episode, we're going to be repairing an antique rocking chair. We've got an early 19th century rocking chair in the shop that is loose and in need of some repair. I can tell it's early 19th century because the screws that hold in the arms to the back of the chair are a flathead screw. And that was typical in rocking chairs from the early 1900s. When you get to the 1940s or so, many of the manufacturers converted them to Phillips head. But it's a nice maple chair. All we're going to be doing is tightening it back up. We're not going to be refinishing it because it's definitely shown a great deal of love and use, and we don't want to ruin that patina. But we have loose arms, we've got some loose spindles, and in the back, we actually have a brake right here. So we're going to be repairing that brake. Somebody at some point had put some nails in to hold the dowel, so we'll try and get those nails out, and then we'll use Hyde glue to get everything back together again. So follow along with us as we repair this rocking chair. Before we start, we're going to do some investigation to see what's actually loose on the chair. So first, we know that these arms are loose and they're fastened in the back with the screws. So we'll take those screws out, remove the arms. Several of the spindles are loose, but we want to be careful as we take them apart that we don't break them because they have a nice curvature to them. The legs feel pretty solid, so we're not too concerned there. Although this one back leg, where it comes into the rocker, actually has a crack in it. So we're going to take a look at that, see what needs to be done, see if we can pry it apart a little bit to glue it back up. Somebody had again put a nail in there, but they're square head nails, which I find very interesting. So we're going to start to take this chair apart very gently, label all of our parts, and begin the repair process. Gentle is the word of the day as we start to disassemble the chair. And what I like to do is use these squeeze clamps, reverse them so I can actually get them down in between, and just apply a little bit of pressure to see if we can get it to pop off. We got the back, now let's work on the front. You don't want to apply too much pressure because the last thing we want to do is damage it. So this has a tenon in it. So we're going to flip the chair over once we loosen the other side, and we'll drill out that tenon, and then this arm will pop right off. But let's do the other side. Try and drive it out without removing the tenon. So this side came out pretty easily by just driving it up. We'll still clean out that tenon and put another one in. So this is the tenon that I'm talking about. And the intent of the tenon is once you get it into the hole, it splays the leg out. So this is definitely shrunk up. There's some glue on there. So we'll cut that tenon out. It wasn't that deep. And we'll install a new one. This spindle is pretty tight, so we're not going to move with that. Oh, that looks like it's in with a tenon too. Actually, no, we'll get some looseness there. We've got somewhat of a dilemma. These spindles are loose, some from the bottom, but not all. And those are glued in. These, on the other hand, are glued, but then somewhere along the line, someone put some small tack nails in here. So the question I have is, if I try and pop this off, there's a very high likelihood, because there's not a lot of grain there, that the nails that are here will pull right through. So I'm going to think through what's the best way to try and disassemble this. Do I get the nails out, and then I have to do some touch-up work to where the nail holes were? Or what do I do? So, some thinking. I decided that removing the nails and doing a minor repair was going to be the best course of action. Here I'm using a 1/16 inch drill bit to drill on either side of the nail, using an awl to pry out as much of the nail as I can, and then using a small pair of nippers, pull each one of those small nails out of the back of the crest rail. With all the nails removed, I then move on to the step of removing the crest rails and the spindles. Using the spreader clamps in reverse, I slowly but surely pop off the crest rail and then remove all the spindles from the back of the chair, careful not to break any of them. Setting them aside, we'll then move on to the step of removing all the old glue from the dowel holes and from the ends of the spindles. When gluing up chairs or any type of fit joint, the most important thing to do is remove all the old glue, because if you don't, then the new glue won't stick to it. So this is typical of what I've seen with many chairs that I've repaired, is there's not a lot of glue on the edges. Most of the glue is down here in the bottom. I spoke with a friend of mine who used to work for a furniture manufacturer in Gardner, Mass. And what they would do is they would squirt some glue in the bottom of the dowel hole, not a lot on the sides, because it was a production environment. And having to wipe off glue drips was slow down production. So they just give it enough to hold it in the chair, and that's it. When you're doing the restoration of furniture, I'm a firm believer that you remove all that old glue, but then also lather the entire dowel hole as well as the dowel itself, so you get a good glue joint. So my process that I go through is, you can see the Hyde glue here on the bottom, is I will scrape most of it off, being careful not to alter the wood itself, just the glue. And I'll get as much off as I can. And if it's stubborn, I'll dip it in a little bit of vinegar, and then that will get the glue off. And then I just take 100 grit paper and just sand the edges, just so I get some bare wood, some clean wood for the glue to be able to grip to. And then I'll go through on the seat of the chair as well and make sure all those dowel holes are cleaned up. So literally it's taken probably less than a minute to come through and clean this up, but it makes a world of difference when you're doing your glue up. I mean, it doesn't have to be spotless like a brand new piece, but you want to get that as much of that glue off as you can, so you can get a good glue joint when all is said and done. I'll do the same thing on this end. There's a little bit of glue here I could feel. As you can tell, there's not a lot on there. So I'm just going to go through, give myself some clean dowel, And then this piece is ready for glue up. With the chair disassembled, we can now move on to the repairs. You may remember that there was a missing piece of wood from the back of the crest rail. What I'm doing is using a sharp chisel to square off the break underneath the crest rail and then the back side of the crest rail. Once the area has been prepared, I can then glue in a block and then shape it to the contour of the crest rail. I want this to be a permanent repair, so I'm going to use PVA glue to glue in the block. I'll cut the block down to size and then use masking tape to act as a clamp. Once it's dry, I'll then come back with a chisel and shape it to match the contour of the crest rail. Once the repair is complete, I'll then come back with some tinted shellac to blend it into the rest of the chair. So all the repairs have been made, and now I'm going to do a dry fit before I start to do any gluing. So we went through and we cleaned up all the holes. We cleaned up all the dowels for each of the legs that had wedges in them. We made new wedges, cleaned out the old wedges, made them to length, and then when we drive them in, we'll then drive the wedges up from underneath and then cut off whatever excess there is. So now what I've done is I have laid out the entire rocker on the bench here in the order by which it's going to be assembled. With a successful dry fit, I then moved on to a final glue up. Using Hyde glue, I applied glue to the ends of the spindles, into the dowel holes in the crest rail and the seat, and then let it sit in clamps overnight to allow that Hyde glue to dry. I then did my touch-ups, removed my clamps, and this once rickety old rocking chair is now ready to be used for many, many years to come. Thank you for tuning in to A.G. Johnson & Son Furniture Restoration. If you're not already a subscriber, please be sure to click the subscribe button and hit that bell icon so you can be reminded of any future videos.
And if you have any questions or comments, please be sure to enter them below.